Thank you, everyone. It's good to see so many of you joining us this afternoon. We're delighted that you're able to join us. My name is Moses Velasco, and I am the Director of Curriculum and Assessment here at the Ontario Teachers Federation. Um, uh, as we begin, I'd like to start things off with a land acknowledgement. I acknowledge that I am in a building that is understood to be in Toronto, widely known as Toronto, which is the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant. And this agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy and the Ojibwe and allied nations was to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. We make this land acknowledgement in the spirit of truth and reconciliation and in response to the Education for Reconciliation calls to action. This land is the traditional territory of the Wendat, the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Métis peoples. I also recognize that this land, the office which I'm in right now, is covered by Treaty 13, which is held by the Mississaugas, the Credit First Nation. Indigenous peoples have stewarded this land for generations, and their deep connection to it continues to shape their cultural practices, knowledge, and identity. I also want to acknowledge and recognize and honor within the membership of OTF those who are Indigenous to this lands. As educators, we recognize the historical injustices inflicted upon Indigenous communities through colonization, forced removals, and the suppression of language and culture. We, as a profession, are committed to learning from their resilience, their wisdom, and rich heritage. Our presence here is an opportunity to listen, to learn, and to engage in meaningful dialogue with Indigenous communities and friends. I thank them for their friendship, their continued and ongoing friendship. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Heidi, our guest speaker. Maybe I'll share my name again. My name is Moses Velasco. I'm the Director of Curriculum and Assessment here with the Ontario Teachers Federation, and I'm pleased to be your moderator for this webinar. Just so that you know, this is, in case you didn't see the advisement, this session is being recorded and will be posted later, I believe, on our website, on our YouTube channel. I think you will be receiving a link as well as registrants to this recording. Slides are not going to be shared. However, you will have the recording to refer back to. And I am certain that Heidi, you see her contact information here, will be happy to answer any questions that you may have after the conclusion of our presentation this afternoon. So with that, Heidi, I'll turn things over to you. Thanks, Heidi.
Thank you so much, Moses, and really thank you to the Ontario Teachers Federation for inviting me to share what we're learning at iThink about artificial intelligence and how we're thinking about AI literacy and fluency. I am an Ontario teacher. I was with the Hamilton Wentworth District School Board for 32 years in K-8. Spent some time at the ministry supporting the work around global competencies, now called transferable skills, and innovation research projects in school districts. And since my retirement, I have been at iThink, supporting the work at iThink around artificial intelligence. And I'll be sharing more with you about that as we go through the presentation. We have a chat available, and so I invite you to share in the chat like questions, things you're wondering about AI, what's concerning you, where you imagine AI is going. And we are going to have a Q&A at the end. So feel free to put down your questions, pop them in the chat, and hopefully I can answer some of those questions or direct you towards resources if I'm not able to do that. Okay, let's get going. Just a little bit about iThink. iThink is an education charity that began at the Rotman School of Management when an MBA candidate also happened to be a K-12 educator and recognized that the problem-solving methodologies being learned in the MBA program, that was way too late for people to be learning those strategies and those frameworks. So the idea was tested out using them with kindergarten children at the beginning. No surprise that kindergarten children are brilliant creative problem solvers. And so I think grew from there. And really, what we're concerned about with young people, especially in the world they're living in today with all of these challenges, is equipping them with problem solving strategies and thinking skills so that they can be confident and optimistic about creating better models of things in the world. That's who we are. As far as artificial intelligence goes, what my role at I think is a teacher coach, and I support something called the Artificial Intelligence Challenge, which has now we're into our second year running this now. Over 3,000 Ontario students from grade 6 right up to grade 12 have participated in the challenge. And as we think about the tensions around AI, Jeffrey Hinton thinking that it's going to be the end of humanity, and Jan LeCun thinking it's a new renaissance, and we understanding that AI risk perpetuating existing oppressions and systems in the landscape, but AI is going to be the standard for young people. And how can we help those young people actively participate in shaping the impact of AI on their lives, but also shaping the future of AI? What do they want to create? What's the world they want with AI? So in our work, the Challenge Kit has a question: how might AI enrich and augment the lives and possibilities for every student at our school? And the Challenge Kit grew from the work I did my last year of teaching with Hamilton, where when ChatGPT was launched, they gave us an iPad with a VPN as I go figure this thing out with your students. And so I was there at the beginning over several months, really observing grade 6 students, their questions or interactions, what concerned them, what excited them, what disturbed them about artificial intelligence. And at the end, they were landed on deeply philosophical questions about what does it mean to be human now that we have this thing in our lives. And so I built the Challenge Kit with those thoughts in mind. With the kit, there's guiding principles as we think about how to support students in their learning about AI. The first guiding principle is deeply human. Fundamentally, artificial intelligence has to be good for humans, for the people creating it, for the people using it, for the people impacted by it. And we need to think about, like, what is it that we value about being human that we don't want to lose? And to understand that deeply human piece, we then need to think critically about artificial intelligence. So, what are the things we need to be thinking about? And we need to explore that question: how can artificial intelligence actually enhance learning? And so in the Challenge Kit, it can run over about 8 weeks, and we invite speakers in to address particular topics with students. They do activities, but most of all, they engage in a problem-solving methodology. One of our thinking frameworks called the Pro, where we leverage tensions and students explore different models of artificial intelligence. It's empathy based, so they consider perspectives of students, teachers, people in the community, and how AI might, different models of AI might benefit people in order for them to get to really deep clarity on what they value about artificial intelligence, and then what they want to create. What's the model in education that they want from AI? And no surprise to you, Ontario students are amazing and remarkable and rich in their ideas and so thoughtful. And I'll be sharing a couple of things later on about things that we're seeing in student thinking as they conceptualize artificial intelligence. As we move forward this, though, we really need to be thinking about evidence, right? Is there evidence that AI actually enhances learning? The studies are starting to come out. So on the left-hand side, maybe, right? This is a study at Stanford with teacher candidates who used an AI coaching tool for them to improve their ability to coach students around math. And that was shown to have a direct impact on improving students' math results, but also maybe not. Right, there's studies that have come out. The AI math tutor study that came out in the study that was had a group that used AI and a group that didn't use AI, and the students who used AI, it was shown that AI actually harmed their learning. They were worse off, and we know what it means when misconceptions are now embedded in students' mind about math and how hard it is to overcome them. Right. And we've also had some studies coming out that AI may impede critical thinking skills, particularly those who have weak critical thinking skills to begin with, and they're offloading cognition to AI. They are being shown to be harmed by that process. So our obligation as educators, as we think about in this process, is to be thoughtful. And I think very much of Dr. Sheila Yasinoff at the Harvard School, and she talks about 4 fallacies of AI, and one being the fallacy of urgency. Right, it's AI. We've got to rush. We've got to rush. We have to be thoughtful, particularly when we know what's happened in the past around social media and the harms that have come out of this. As we move forward with AI, how can we think and be thoughtful and conscious of keeping the children, the students in our school safe as we begin to test out the possibilities of artificial intelligence, which are pretty exciting and kind of disturbing at the same time, right? There's tensions within that. And how do we give ourselves and the students space to explore those tensions and see possibilities in that? And so that's what the challenge is all about. When I think of AI literacy, this session is going to be about AI literacy and AI fluency. And for us at I Think, this is the way we're conceptualizing AI literacy. Think of literacy as the basic foundation, kind of like being able to read and write in the context of AI. That means you have to have knowledge and understanding of what AI is, how it actually works at a higher, kind of a higher level, and the way that it impacts the world. So I'm going to speak to that a little bit first. As I'm going forward, please pop questions into the chat. Moses is going to be monitoring those for our discussion afterwards. If there's something you're, not sure about, happy to address. So for us at I Think, basic literacy around AI, of course, involves the definition. This is Jan LeCun's definition. AI is any technology capable of solving complex problems that would normally be attributed to humans and animals. So see this as a tool that can make decisions and help solve problems, right? And that it's going to change over time. So what we call AI now, we may not call AI in the future as the technology has changed. So it's not something that's fixed. Some basic understanding students and teachers need is the ways in which it's already present in their lives. That's not obvious to students. That they actually are using artificial intelligence in many different ways, whether they're getting recommendations or mapping tools or interacting with their devices that they can speak to. But we also have to find ways to explore the nefarious uses of AI. Deep fakes are big right now. We actually had a speaker, a former intelligence officer in the AI challenge, come in and speak to students. So in a world of deep fakes, how do you protect yourself from those? Has to do with critical thinking, but it was a pretty amazing conversation for us to be able to have. But other nefarious uses are things like cyber attacks and hacking. Remember, AI can learn from the decisions it makes about data. So you can imagine down the road, AI agents learning to avoid detection in security systems as they learn from the actions and decisions it makes, they can improve themselves. So then what happens in our school system around teaching, not just school, but as citizens, things like cybersecurity. And then surveillance, right? We understand why surveillance is necessary. We're sitting in the attention of that, but we know that undemocratic nations are using surveillance to stop unrest from happening before it can even happen, right? Or we have data being used within our school system that's really useful, though, as well. We're seeing some interesting things in students around how they're conceptualizing surveillance, how they describe it, where they are comfortable with it being used. So students need an opportunity in the world of artificial intelligence to explore those things. They also need to understand the AI that we're predominantly talking about, we're talking about in school systems, is generative AI, which runs on something called neural networks or deep learning. And you may be familiar with this already, but if you're not, I'll just quickly explain. It's, the idea that if we create artificial neurons, very similar to the brain, and maybe we can process large amounts of information differently if we're using artificial neurons. And what's important to remember in a neural network is it's not human. No emotions, can't feel, can't actually think. All it is really math. Artificial intelligence is math, using linear algebra and calculus, turning data into numbers, finding patterns in those numbers, and then turning them back into language. So cat sat on a goes into the network, gets turned into numbers, right? The neural network analyzes compares it to all the patterns it has in its training data until we get the output, it's most likely going to be Matt. 97% confident, that's a confidence score, that the answer is Matt. We often don't get to see, the other things that it considered. Could it have been whacked? Could it have been sad? Things like that. And it doesn't actually understand any of this information because the information's been turned into numbers. Important to remember here that not even the scientists understand how the neural network is getting those results. They know they can put the information in, it can be turned into numbers. They know they can generate a result, but that those blue neurons, that's kind of the black box of AI. And that's part of the reason why, distrust is there, because what's actually happening in those boxes. I'm going to be speaking to that a little bit later. Right? Different forms of AI. Supervised learning, that is where humans have to actually train the AI. In this case, they're training the AI to recognize a dog. Dog, dog, not a dog. Anything with a dog, it's a 1. Anything without a dog is a 0. Hundreds of thousands of images need to be shown until it recognizes what a dog is, but that's all it knows. It also has to be trained on a cat, goat, pig, everything else out there. Unsupervised learning, that's the deep learning neural network that I showed you, where the AI can find the patterns in the data on its own and train itself on it. But once a model is created, it still has to be trained by humans. And compare that to a young child, toddler learning what a dog is and the rich complexity of being a human, and that a child can see a dog a couple of times, knows that it's a dog, knows that different breeds are dogs, knows that it's not a cat. There's still no comparison between the full lived experience of human intelligence compared to AI. And remembering to bring the conversation back to students around that, what do they value about being human, what's unique about being human, we want to keep that in mind. So those are some basic understandings from my point of view around AI literacy. It's understanding what AI is, how it works, and the things that we need to be thinking about. AI fluency is a step beyond literacy. It's about being more skilled and confident in using AI tools and thinking critically about them. It involves knowing not just what AI is, but also how to apply it effectively, right? To get the results that we want. Because remember, it's a tool that can help solve problems and make decisions. How amazing is that? And ethically, right? We need to keep those ethics in mind of what is a responsible use? What do we want it to be used for? We need to engage students in those conversations about that. And so the critical thinking part is the piece that I think is most important when we're talking about AI fluency. But what do students need to know and understand so they can think critically about AI? Okay, so I'm going to give you my go-to prompt. Every time I have a presentation to do, I go to my AI image generator, and I want you to think of your own families. I want you to think of the families of the children in your classrooms that you've seen over the year. Get a picture in your head of what family means to you. And here's the kind of thing I get from AI. Right? Problematic. You may want to pop into the chat all the different things that you're seeing about it, right? It's normative is a word that I would use to describe that. It comes straight out of the training data, right? Heteronormative. We got a woman and a man, children, they're white, they're light skinned, they're Eurocentric in their features, they're all thin, normative standards of beauty in there, the setting that they're sitting in. There's so much that is problematic within this image that's being generated by AI. And I want you to imagine a child sitting in the classroom who doesn't look like that. And yet we're bringing this tool into the classroom and we're showing that, we're having them use and interact with it. Well, you need to be asking for something better from AI, but we really need to understand training data and what is in the training data. And I just want to speak to one more thing about this picture. Why is everybody ridiculously happy in AI generated images? And it comes directly from the training data. AI is trained on things that are on the internet, and pictures that people tend to upload at the internet are generally happy, on vacation, doing their sporting activities, celebrations, family, all those kinds of things. So the training data has learned that humans are happy. It's called the everything is awesome bias, which is problematic in itself. And that's why you see ridiculously happy AI people, I don't know, Stepford families of artificial intelligence, right? Okay. So artificial intelligence is biased. Let's explore that a little bit more. What are the ways in which artificial intelligence is biased? And then let's think about the kinds of conversations we need to be having with our students about that. All right. Artificial intelligence is biased in terms of who is actually creating the algorithms. Every year, Stanford publishes an AI index that's kind of a pulse on artificial intelligence around the globe. This graphic is from 2019, 2020. There's been some shifts within this, and if you go on and you look at last year's report, you'll see that Canada and the United States, the purple part there, reflecting white people, our scores are a little bit better. But the graphic is of tenure-track faculty as a percentage of totals at computer science departments at the top universities around the world. Right? And we can see there's a bias within that. So we need to be thinking about who's creating AI, who isn't creating AI, and why does that matter? It matters for a couple of reasons. If we think back to the purpose of what AI is, right, it's to help us make decisions and solve problems. People who have access to AI are probably going to focus on the kinds of problems that matter to them, which means other people are excluded from using artificial intelligence because they don't know how to advance their own decision-making and problem-solving skills. Of course, it matters because in terms of opportunity, we want to create the field of artificial intelligence and the economy that's going to grow out of that is going to rapidly change our world. And we want all people to participate in that. So there's an opportunity question here. But there's something unique about AI, right? And that AI is powerful, and the people creating the algorithms are likely to create algorithms that allow them to stay in their positions of privilege and power, right? And you're going to see that increasing equity gap because they know how to use AI and other people don't. So the conversation we need to be asking ourselves within the education system is, as AI is being created for the education system, a lot of the times with non-educators creating it for education, how do we get teachers' voice and student voice at the table? Right? How do we get our students there? How do we get ourselves there? What do we want from AI? And how can we help shape those algorithms into things that are actually useful for us in our school system? AI is biased in terms of where the training data is coming from. For the large language models that we are using, Copilot, ChatGPT, Claude, all of those types of models, the training data is coming predominantly from the global north, mostly North America, mostly in English. So we need to be thinking about who's represented in the data, who isn't represented in the data. Why does it matter? It matters because more than half the world is absent. So their perspectives and points of view are not reflected in the results that we're generating from AI. And if you think of data as a mirror, right? ChatGPT, it's everything on the internet, mostly from North America. It's really reflecting ourselves back to ourselves. Some countries are so small, they don't even have enough data because AI uses vast amounts of data in order to be able to generate those prompts. So even if they wanted to be represented in the data, they can't be present because they're not generating enough data to be a part of it. So as we move and use generative AI and AI in these large language models, we need to teach students to ask questions, right, around data. When was the data set created? Who created the data set? Why was the data set created? What biases are in the data set? How is privacy protected in the data set? Because there's different mechanisms for protecting privacy, and mechanisms can bias data, and they can also compromise privacy in different ways. So you can have a different conversation around privacy once you understand how privacy and data is actually protected. Okay? And then who has control of the data that we're all, being exposed to? Data sovereignty is a huge question. So in this context here that I'm showing you, data sovereignty is the right of First Nations to manage and control data about themselves, their culture, their lands, or resources. First Nations data being used in training machine learning systems without permission actually violates this right to data sovereignty. And Ontario chiefs have actually put together a policy document and discussion questions for everyone to consider how their data, the stories, their future within the world of artificial intelligence, how they imagine their stories being used, and what are their rights around that. But data sovereignty isn't just for First Nations people. As Canadians, we need to think about it. You may have noticed there's a little bit of tension right now between our neighbors to the south and Canadians. And think of something like health data, right, being held in Canada by law, it has to be, but in the hands of American companies. And as things change to the south and laws change to the south, and those companies are subject to rules in another country, how our data might be used could change. So we need to think about data sovereignty within the context of Canada, or if we think of Africa, right, and the fears there that people from the global north are going to come with AI and take their data and use that data to create things to sell back to them, just another form of colonization. And it's really interesting to go and look at the kinds of things that are happening around Africa in terms of creating large language models, models that reflect their values and culture, and their effort to keep control of data within countries in Africa. So lots you can explore here with your students as you think about artificial intelligence. And then we need to think about, as we think critically about AI, who and what is exploited in the creation of AI, and have those conversations with our students. You may be familiar with his story when ChatGPT was first launched. A story exploded in the media that Kenyan workers were being paid less than $2 an hour to train the large language model. Remember, a neural network, in the process of creating a model, it's like giving birth to a baby. And then the baby has to be trained, and that training takes place by humans. And humans have to, show the AI things to examples and ask it to generate things so that the large language model can learn what are the kinds of prompts, or what's the type of content that's acceptable to generate. And that work happens in Africa because it's labor intensive. And the people doing that work have been harmed in that process. I had the opportunity to speak with Moffat Okinye, who was part of that first group training ChatGPT. I spoke with him a few weeks ago, and he shared with some of the things of what that experience was like and his concerns about the workers there. And Moffat has actually started a rights group, a labor rights group. Here we are as Ontario teachers and our Teachers Federation with our union protections, yet people, and we're using generative AI, large language models, and yet there's a whole group of people who are being exploited in the creation of this, tensions within that, in a country that's trying to develop its tech sector. And you can actually follow Moffat's work and the work that is happening in Kenya and other countries in Africa to grow labor rights around the creation of artificial intelligence. So that awareness of the ecosystem in which all of these AI, large language models, is operating, and having conversations around the ethics as we use AI and how AI is being created, definitely needs to be part of our conversation. So we thought about who's creating algorithms. We've thought about training data, where it comes from. We've thought about data sovereignty. We've thought about who and what is exploited. These models that we're bringing into our classroom, right? We're currently being handed particular types of large language models. What are the other possibilities out there as we become fluent in using AI? So I'd like to introduce you to Stephanie Dinkins. She's American. She works in digital media and artificial intelligence. She's really concerned. And her question is, if people of color are not contributing to AI systems, what happens when those systems become the mesh that run the city, the country, the world? And Stephanie has actually created an AI entity called N2, not the only one. And N2 is trained on the oral histories of 3 generations of Black women. So it's got deep cultural roots across several generations and very broad. And N2's task as an agent who's learning from data and interactions is to focus on the concerns and interests of a community that's typically underrepresented in the tech sector, Black women. Right. So as we think about bringing AI into our classrooms, we want to be thinking about making sure that we're not getting stuck in a particular idea of what artificial intelligence is and what other models are out there. And we're ensuring that our students are being connected to those models and differences so that we start to see the complexity and possibilities within artificial intelligence as it's being created. And we want to think about the impact as well of the models that we're bringing into the classroom. So what I'm showing you here as an AI evaluation system that has been created by a woman named Christelle Mamboziga. She's originally Congolese and from France. She now works in Silicon Valley. And she's developed an assessment tool for analyzing the biases in AI-generated images. And it comes from her own personal experience. When we went online in the pandemic several years ago, she was noticing that her AI meeting tool didn't recognize her afro. It was just not showing up at all. And she was complaining about the biases in the tool, and people in her workplace were just not getting why this is problematic, that her afro was not showing up. And then recently, in the past year or so, AI headshot generator tools have come out where you can upload your own image and it will turn it into a professional headshot. And to her horror, on the left-hand side, you see the picture, her picture that she uploaded. You can see her braids, her darker skin, her features. And on the right-hand side is what the AI generated, right? And what has happened to her. The braids are gone. The skin has been lightened. Eurocentric features, right, have been generated. Her body's thinner, all those kinds of things. And think back to that picture I showed you at the beginning with of the Canadian family. Now you're starting to have it show up here and seeing the impact. And as she tested out these image generators, it's not just her as a Black woman whose identity is being erased, but it changes if you're older, makes you look younger, right? It makes hijabs just disappear. It just tends to turn people towards a particular norm, white, Eurocentric, as the headshots are being created. And she also spoke to the psychological well-being impact. She shared some data with us about the impact that this has on people. So she actually has developed an AI-enabled bias detection tool that companies can use to find out what kinds of biases are showing up in the things that they are generating in order to improve the AI. Because we want AI to work well. Nobody wants it to work badly. How can we contribute to making it better? And that's her contribution. Other models we can bring to the classroom as we think about models of artificial intelligence. This one I just absolutely love. I stumbled across it a couple of years ago. Abundant intelligences. Notice that reframing of AI, that there are many kinds of intelligences. And this is started at Concordia University, funded by the Canadian government. It's a network of Indigenous communities in Hawaii, New Zealand, United States, and in Canada. And they're looking at creating forms of artificial intelligence that, first of all, are Indigenous-led, and that conceptualize, design, develop, and deploy artificial intelligence based on Indigenous knowledge systems. Can we create forms of AI that reflect Indigenous knowledge systems? When I came across that, I still remember the impact, because that was the first time I thought, oh, there are other ways to describe what artificial intelligence is. There are beautiful ways to describe the possibilities of artificial intelligence. So even the language that's being used and how AI is being talked about in abundant intelligences is really interesting to go look at. And so as educators in the classroom, and we're committed to land acknowledgements and truth and reconciliation, we need to be paying attention to what is happening in Indigenous communities as artificial intelligence is being developed, and that our students are encountering these other models of AI, right? Because we're working towards fluency, critical thinking, building models of AI that reflect the best of what it means to be human. And I'd like to introduce you to, can we make our data better? One of the things that comes up again and again and again in student thinking in the AI challenge has to do with fairness, ethics, and really, for the first time, we're seeing language around informed consent. That things that are in the large language models that are currently being used, whether it's image generators, ChatGPT, Copilot, all of that data has been taken without permission by the artists, the writers, people who put things on the internet, never expecting them to end up in a large language training model. And it's possible to create data sets that are not exploitative in that way. So Fairly Trained is an organization that helps companies certify their training data, that the training data being used in generative AI has been ethically sourced. Consideration has been given to it being less biased. right? That there's some thought that has gone into the creation of the data set that then is used to generate the AI. And as educators in our classrooms, using our voices to advocate for forms of artificial intelligence that we want. What do we as educators want from artificial intelligence? Pushing back and asking for these kinds of things, I think, are really, really, really important. I'm just looking at my time here. So as you imagine your students using those tools, large language models, having deeper and deeper, more creative conversations with artificial intelligence, part of what's problematic is that it makes mistakes. We all know that, right? But we don't really know what's happening in the black box in those neural networks. But there's work happening around that called explainable AI. And that is, if you think of different careers you might want your students to be going in, those are really people working on tools to help us figure out how did the AI come to the decision or the recommendation that it did so that we can trust it because we want to use it. We want to rely on it. We want it to work well for us. We need to understand that. So this particular image that I'm showing to you is from the University of Waterloo. Joel Orseth spoke to our students last year about explainable AI. He spoke about two things, how to be safe, but also the tools they're developing at the University of Waterloo to help us understand the decisions that AI is making when it generates something for us. And so the tool he demoed for us is backward maps. When you get something generated for ChatGPT, for example, when you've uploaded PDFs, you can do that now with a paid version of ChatGPT. You can upload your PDFs and ChatGPT uses those to then generate things. And what they've discovered, the thing that he showed to the students in the challenge was that they have learned that it really matters what order you upload those PDFs in because the GPT pays more attention to what's been uploaded first compared to what's been uploaded last, and you can really change the output of that. I've learned from Shoshana Rosenberg, who's head of Women in AI Governance, she's leading that work globally, that when you upload PDFs, what happens is the GPT makes a summary of that PDF. Never refers to your PDF and the complexities in that again. It only ever refers to its summary as it's generating things. So part of the fluency piece of moving forward is getting these tools that are going to help us understand how the AI is working and why the AI has made the decision that it has made, so that as we use artificial intelligence to help us make decisions and solve problems and engage in ever richer conversations with these large language models, right, that we have some confidence about what's being generated because we're understanding what the AI is doing and how it works. And so this is a new field, an exciting field, but I'm looking forward to seeing what's coming down the road. I've just had a chance to talk about a couple of biases or other ones, but those are ones that I highlighted today. But I want to shift now to what are we seeing in student thinking? Because remember, our work at I Think is about student voice and agency, and how can students shape the role of influence, the place of or the influence of AI in their lives, but also shape the future of artificial intelligence. The question they're asking how much in the challenge is how might AI enhance, augment the lives and possibilities of every student. So I'd like to show you one response. This came from grade 9 students at the TDSB virtual school. And after going through the challenge, this was the conclusion that they landed at. All about an ethical stance. And what we're finding from students is that they want to be ethical and they want to be using artificial intelligence in the right way. And so these students actually arrived at a conclusion. We also want to rebuild the trust between students and teachers that has eroded due to unethical use of AI over the past 2 years. We think that acknowledging the elephant in the room and teaching us how to use it in an academically honest way will make teachers trust us more. And this is the students driving this after going through the challenge and having a deep opportunities to think deeply about artificial intelligence, wanting that to be the future. But lots of different things come out of the challenge and how this, as I the 3,000 students have gone through it from grade 6 to grade 12. And what always strikes me is that role of the teacher within all of this, and how much the teachers still guide and shape the learning, and even the way the challenge unfolds in the classroom and where students end up in this. So that professional judgment piece is still very much a part of AI as we move forward with it. In this case, as you think of fluency, start to think of students as creators with artificial intelligence. Right? So it's going to be them and their interest augmented by AI. And a fun thing to do with your students is actually to pick some silly things, really silly, toilets and artificial intelligence, socks and artificial intelligence, potato chips and artificial intelligence. Go look for the connection. You're going to find them and you'll be blown away by some of those things. And then have them think about their interests: hockey, music, sewing, knitting, snowboarding. And how is artificial intelligence being included in their particular interests? Because that's what we want them to be developing as they move forward, how artificial intelligence is connected to the things that they're interested in. But in this case of this particular students, they were working on the Sustainable Development Goals and within their own community context of their school, and recognizing the actual problem in their school was around recycling and garbage and stuff being thrown into the wrong bin or compost, and could they use AI to help solve that problem? So what they did was they used trainable machine. They started taking pictures of things that were garbage, things that were compost, things that were for recycling. They created a data set, which they then used to train AI on. And what they're working on now is creating an app that can be used within their school that students can use to take a picture of something and figure out, does this go in the garbage? Does this go in recycling? Does this go into compost? So here you see student voice and agency as part of fluency, and thinking carefully about the problems students want to solve, and then how they can integrate artificial intelligence into those processes. And there's starting to be things available for us to do this kind of work with our students in the classroom. That's incredibly exciting. They're incredibly excited. They're amazing. So in terms of what we're seeing from students, we actually have published an impact report. I'm just going to highlight a couple of things here as we think about what do students want from AI and what are they imagining for their future. One of the interesting things in the challenge is it's empathy-based. And for the first time, for many of them, they're thinking about the learning needs of their peers, themselves, their teachers, their parents. And what we've discovered in the AI challenge is that all the problems that we see as educators, they see. They see students in the class whose needs aren't being met because there's too many students or it's too busy and the teacher can't get to them. They see students not being able to get help at home, perhaps because of language barriers, or parents don't have the time or the knowledge. They see their peers with learning difficulties, dyslexia, confusions around math, class moving at a different pace. They have incredible empathy for their teachers, in that they see that, oh my, actually, my teacher has so much work to do and has to work at night and can't meet the needs of everybody in the class. And that's really hard for our teachers. They're deeply empathetic for their teachers, but also for their parents, and their parents feeling sometimes disconnected for the school or not really understanding. And as they think about AI, they're imagining AI as a catalyst for profound systemic change and a mechanism to address longstanding equity issues. How can we use artificial intelligence to address some of these problems within our school? And they have ideas for that. We could do this with it. We could create an AI for the school. We could create an AI that communicates more directly with students and lets them know of opportunities. So the students are highly imaginative in thinking about how they want to use AI in ways that benefits the community. Safety comes up a lot for students. They see safe AI as essential to education, and they understand there's issues around privacy, security, biased data sets, misinformation, disinformation, potential misuse of AI. They name it a lot, and they have ideas about how we can solve those kinds of things. They're not satisfied with the forms of AI that we are currently using, and they're looking for adults to step in here and step up and advocate on their behalf to make sure the forms of AI that they're using are safe for them to use, because they see power and potential in them. They are super excited that AI has a potential to personalize learning for them, and that AI can really, perhaps for the first time, support learning needs of the many different students who are in the classroom. They see AI in its ability to enhance their own experience as also enhancing the teacher's experience. And so they're excited by teachers learning to use AI and students learning to use AI. And they're imagining perhaps there can be new opportunities now because AI is allowing us to access things in a different way. What have we've noticed this year in student thinking? What's coming out? Super interesting. I haven't seen this really before. A lot of the ideas have been around making learning more efficient. Students are really excited and talking about the way artificial intelligence can transform information and to make it more accessible and interesting and engaging. So one of the examples that came up is that students were imagining, their science course content, and could we use AI to transform that content into a leveled game? And then students interact with the game in order to learn the content. Right? They're super excited by the possibilities of AI transforming the way they access learning, and that it can create new things, and what can they co-create with AI that's beneficial and useful and exciting and engaging. And they're also seeing the personalized learning because as soon as they're stuck, maybe they can turn to an AI coach or an AI tutor and get the help that they need, that this is going to change how we use time in schools and how they use their time at school. Efficiency is the word that comes up. And how will that then liberate them, free them up to perhaps focus on other and different things, because AI is allowing them now to engage with materials in different ways. What they don't want to lose is that human contact. They value their teachers. They see AI as a support for like simpler things, but they imagine and they conceptualize the role of the teacher in the classroom as very much central. And the human interactions are maybe more about the deeper, more challenging, more difficult parts of learning that we can't offload to artificial intelligence, right? Still has to take place in the classroom, and they're deeply committed. They're deeply committed to that kind of a thing. Um, so I'm inviting you. I'm not quite at the end. I'm looking at my time here. I know we have a few more minutes. I know it's been a lot that we've gone through so far, but I know that please start to put your questions, concerns into the chat as I hit this last little bit. I know that prompting is the big thing, right? We need to learn how to prompt. And what does that mean to prompt? And what does it mean to prompt in ways that are creative and engage students in thinking, not just offloading AI? So Gary L. Stager has just come out with a book that's absolutely fascinating. Moses, I will get you the title to that book. And he's a constructivist in his learning, in his approach to learning, and is that through interacting with technology and asking questions that we learn. Right, so he's very much interested in how we combine AI and students together to engage in deep learning. So here's an example of a conversation that you could launch with through AI. Student puts in, I'm a high school student, and I want you to simulate a conversation between Newton's laws of gravity and general relativity. Really interesting question. But then you're also prompting the AI after every exchange. So after every exchange between Newton's laws of gravity and general relativity, see if I have anything to add. Right? So turn to me as a student and ask me questions, or invite me to express my thoughts on this as I grapple about those two ideas and engage in conversation about it. So there's a possibility to have much more interesting and deeper and different ways of approaching knowledge through the prompts that we use with artificial intelligence. Here's another one from Gary's book. In terms of using AI to create things, in this case, games. So a prompt you can put in, you're helping a middle school student create a web-based game that is on a topic in biology. The games could be about animal behavior, evolution, epidemics, ecosystems, or any other topic in biology. Start by asking the student if they have an idea for a game. Wait for an answer. So you can ask the GPT a question, then ask it to wait. So you as a student have time to think. If they don't have an idea, then ask a series of questions, waiting for responses after each one to find out the student's interest and knowledge, and then suggest several ideas. So it's really working with the AI as a thinking partner as the students, conceptualizes what their biology-related game could be. And then guide the student to begin by describing a very simplified version of the game they are thinking of. Remind them to make small improvements until they get a game like that. So in this kind of a prompt, students are engaging with AI in a conversational way, getting to ever deeper levels of thinking. The AI isn't telling them what the game should be, but the students interacting in a conversation with AI, and the AI is prompting the students to think deeper and to create in order to produce something at the end. So if we think of student augmented by artificial intelligence, here is an example of the beginnings of that. This is a really fun one to play with. It goes on to actually then you generate the code for it, right? And then you take that code and you put it into an application. That's where that heads towards in the book, but I just snipped a part of it. Here's an example, a conversation that I had with AI, my frustration with AI. And my students in grade 6 had the same frustration. AI seems to love happy, pleasant endings where conflicts and stories get resolved and everybody comes out satisfied with the outcome. And that's a very annoying way for literature to happen. But I asked the AI to generate a conversation between people at Exxon who knew carbon emissions were going to cause climate change, and 2 Inuit hunters in the Arctic, who are experiencing the impacts of climate change, including melting permafrost and thinning ice, include questions they might ask each other as the conversation progresses. Right, so you can conversations across time where you're grappling with concepts. The conversation came out, and I was not satisfied with it. So then I prompted it to do something deeper. And I said, well, the people at Exxon knew that climate change was going to happen, but hid the information from the public. That happened in the 1960s. Now they have returned to Earth and can see what has happened. Update the conversation. And yet again, I got a very pleasant ending on the story where everybody was happy and satisfied. So then I asked it, right, how come you always end stories with a positive revolution? Are you trained to do that? Right, so we can engage in our responses by asking AI to explain itself to us and how it has been trained and designed. Right? And look what it said to me. You've caught on to my storytelling tendencies. I try to weave positivity into stories because it fosters hope and inspires action. People often find it easier to engage with and reflect on a narrative that leaves them with a sense of possibility, especially dealing with heavy topics. That being said, I'm not bound to always have positive resolutions. If a more somber or open-ended ending feels truer to the story or aligns better with your vision, I can absolutely adapt. Would you like me to revise the conversation with a different tone or outcome? Right? And then it prompted me with a question to ask it. What principles actually guide your storytelling approach? Right? And then I'm inquiring into the design of the LLM, like how it's been designed. Right? Those trainers that we think of in Kenya, training those large language models with outputs and what they want from it. Like what has it been trained to do? Right, as it generates those prompts. So you can engage in conversations with large language models, inquiring into the operating principles of the models. And if you start to interact with Claude or Copilot or ChatGPT, they all behave very differently in terms of their outputs, right? And exploring those differences and asking about those differences in order to understand the models better is part of what I consider to be fluency with artificial intelligence. Right. So I am coming to the end. As we move forward, we're continuing to support teacher education, really around the problem-solving piece, right? The pro model and how can we engage students in deep thinking. So you can look out for things coming up. But most of all, I invite you to connect with us at I Think if you have questions about AI or you have questions about how can we engage students in deep and meaningful problem solving. I'm happy to connect with you and have some conversations about that. But with that, Moses, I'm going to invite you back in and let's maybe get to Q&A.
Yeah, Heidi, thank you so much for that very uh, comprehensive. I'm going to use the word comprehensive overview of AI literacy, AI fluency. I think what's particularly exciting is that all of this learning that you've shared stems from your work with students and their work specifically with AI. I think that that's particularly powerful. So in the chat, there are a few questions here that have been shared. I just want to confirm that the AI fallacies article that you made reference to, I shared one. I was aware of one, and I popped it in there. I'm just not sure if this is the article, but at some point, if you can take a look, just catching the author here, Melanie Mitchell. I don't know if that name sounds familiar, but
So that is not the one. You know what? I will go right now and I'll go and get the link to Sheila
okay,
Yasinov's work and I'll pop that
okay.
into the chat.
Thank
I
you very
can't with this.
much.
Okay.
Um, so while you're doing that, you're sharing did you want to share your search
I'm
screen?
going to stop sharing my
Okay.
screen.
Sounds good. So one of the questions that came up is suggestions on activities that we can in which we can use AI. I'm going to interpret this question a little bit and academically with integrity, like be able to do it support academic integrity. Um, I wonder if you could make a comment on some of the examples you gave and how those protect perhaps academic integrity.
Absolutely. That is like the million-dollar question I think everybody has right now around that. We in the AI challenge, we had somebody come in and speak. Actually, she's come in for the third time now, Lyran, from Dr. Todd Cunningham's psychology lab at OISE, where they're using artificial intelligence to help students with learning disabilities, dyslexia, support their learning. And he came in and gave some demos about how you can use AI in ways to support and enhance learning, but not replace learning. Right, which is the million-dollar piece. So first of all, it's all those conversations around bias and ethics and those kinds of things that I spoke to help students develop an ethical stance. But I'll give you some examples of ways you can use AI to support learning, but not replace learning. So let's say you have a student or yourself or who struggles or doesn't struggle with organizational issues, right? You hand an assignment and that student doesn't even know where to begin, right? It's happened to me. I'm sure it happens to everyone. You can take that assignment and you can chunk it. You can ask AI to chunk it for them. So you can upload that assignment, or the student can upload an assignment and says, I have this essay that is due on about this topic that is due in 4 weeks' time. This is the assignment to what I need to do. Can you break it down for me into all the steps I need to do to complete this assignment and plot it into time over the 4 weeks so I know what I need to get done? Right? So there it's providing structure for a student to use AI to develop a work plan, but not actually doing the work. So it may recommend things to you, to the student, like go and research and use, find some sources on the information. So they're provided with the steps, but not doing the work for you. Liren showed two really great examples, well, several actually, around how to use it to support reading and how to use it to support writing. So for reading, for example, his example was, let's say you're having a geology text that has lots of really difficult vocabulary for the student and those students who struggle with reading. And that long text is just too difficult for them to ask it. And there's all kinds of subject specific vocabulary within that. You can put that text into AI and you can write a prompt. It needs to be fairly specific, but could you please pick out for me all of the important words or all of the keywords that I need to understand in order to read this article, and provide a definition for each word. And then the AI will go through that article and it'll pick out the vocabulary that the students need to learn. And then you could even further say, can you take that and organize it into a table for me? And so the students can get the vocabulary, practice the vocabulary, and then that allows them to then go access the longer text, for example, with having picked out some of the things that might cause struggles for them. So that's an example of how you could use that in reading. For writing, um, it's really, really good for brainstorming, for generating ideas. So I want to write about this particular topic. Can you give me some ideas that I could write about as a particular starting point? Um, you can ask it to coach you, right? So I'm needing to write a text. I'm just going to use a 5-paragraph essay for want of a better genre. Can you please remind me what a 5-paragraph essay is and what are the things that I need to include in my 5-paragraph essay? So you can use the AI as a coach and as an instructor to help you learn things, but then you still need to do the writing of those things yourself. So there are some starting ways that you can begin using artificial intelligence. I also highly recommend Gary Stager's book that I spoke about. He's got some very interesting examples from different areas, different subjects, where, and I'll send the link to that book to Moses, and we can forward that to people. Of how to use it creatively. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, it is. One of the things, there's another kind of question I think that is related to this. So your statements about how do we use AI with our students to support their learning as opposed to do the learning for them. That one example that you provided where the AI was taking the like writing out a conversation between two people within, I think it was Exxon, right? And so that kind of creative thinking and putting yourself within that situation and then using your knowledge to create an output, right? Like that, I can imagine a teacher may have wanted to give that to students as an assignment, right? So you've learned about this. Now put yourself the situation where Exxon did know and they still didn't, do what they're supposed to do, and now you've got a whistleblower that wants to have a conversation, that draft out, like script out that conversation. That might be an assignment that a teacher might give students. We've introduced it where AI is now doing that. So where what are the things that maybe we might want to think about to further extend that? If we know the AI could do that particular level of processing, if you will, and then output, what might we want to be thinking about to like further extend the learning? And given that that's might be that we might already have thought about doing with students.
So this is where the critical thinking piece and where human judgment is so very, very important, and where you need to be having those conversations about the student. The output is a conversation. We know AI makes mistakes. So part of that piece is for the students in the critical thinking is then to go and validate the facts, right? Is what's being said in the conversation actually true? Because remember, with explainable AI, we don't understand the decisions that AI is making. So for students in this process, validating information is a key and important skill, right? And still teaching those things to let's go look at sources. Are these sources accurate? Is our information being confirmed? It said this about, Exxon. Is that actually true? It said this about, Inuit hunters. Is this actually true? Right. So validating the outputs is really an important skill that students need to develop.
Thank you for that. I wholeheartedly agree. We are at a point now where, as you demonstrated, the outputs that AI puts there can't necessarily be trusted because of the training data. So it is going to have a biased perspective. So to your point, being able to remind our students is a good reminder to them that you can't take everything for granted that AI puts out there. It reminds me a little bit like those beginning conversations, though, and continue conversations around platforms like Wikipedia, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, but there's a due diligence that we have to apply here when we are looking to technology, and even in a lot of ways, there's similarities between Wikipedia as a data source in terms of going from the collective and then bringing it together, being able to trust that and going back to our sources, right? So I think that's very helpful in thinking
And
about what.
I think also the metacognition part, right? So if we think about deeply human, part of this moment of time that we're finding ourselves in is if providing opportunities for students to reflect on, okay, so when I did this with artificial intelligence and I generated this particular thing, how did that feel? Did I actually learn this information? This is actually a valid way, and that's part of like getting the evidence about AI. Is it actually going to enhance learning? We don't know yet, right? So getting the students to self-assess their use of artificial intelligence and whether or not they feel for themselves they have a deeper, more meaningful learning experience that is accurate when they're using AI, or do they prefer to access information other ways or think or learn to think in other ways and validate their own thinking? So what's lost when I do this about how I go about learning?
It's certainly what I'm hearing echoed there is, we one of the things that I certainly struggled with as a teacher was thinking about assessment as learning. I seem to get the assessment for learning and the assessment of learning stuff, like that's familiar, but that assessment as learning where students are thinking of themselves as learners and just applying the assessment lens to their own learning. Like what am I really learning here? And now with the introduction of AI potentially within that process, how does that enhance my learning? Am I really deepening my learning here? Or am I using AI not really just as a way to just build my knowledge? So you know how we have the achievement chart and we have thinking, application, critical thinking, and communication? Maybe reflecting on those four achievement categories using when I use AI, am I deepening my thinking? Am I using it to think more critically? And what would I point to as evidence of my deeper critical thinking and engaging in particular the critical thinking process? So I think that's very helpful. Thanks, Heidi. There
Yeah.
is, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Um, and the jury's still out on that, right? We're just all in a learning phase, and it's important to let students know that the jury is out on that, and to have them really think deeply about, what they want from AI in their own process of learning. I'm just putting into the YouTube chat the video, or not the YouTube chat, the YouTube video from Dr. Sheila Yasinoff, the keynote she gave about the four fallacies of AI and democracy, and in there are the four fallacies of AI.
Great, thank you very much. We have another question. It's more on the technical side. Do you know if any large language models, LLMs, are looking to have educational licensing, and I'm putting that in quotes, for their tools? Are you familiar with any of them making moves to do that?
I'm not an expert in licensing of AI tools. I will say this. So, Mark Daly is Chief AI Officer at Western University and is doing a lot of talking in education right now. And his thoughts on this, he shared with us, is that really like staying within the large language models themselves right now is a great place to be. I think everyone's struggling around licensing of AI tools and what to approve. I know that the university or the Ottawa Catholic District School Board, I think, has 4 tools for AI that they have approved for use within their school, their school board. So you might want to turn and look at other boards. Some of the tools that have been created for education, though, I'm somewhat wary about. They're exciting and they're interesting, but you really need to understand data. So, tools like Character AI, which was created by non-educators, and there has been some actual harms including, young people taking their lives because of the interactions they had in the conversation with that. But there's another tool that was, created in North America being used in a school in the UK, and an educator was sharing just on LinkedIn the experience with the tool. So this tool has an AI tool that you can have a conversation with it. And he was just testing the flagging of concerns to a teacher should a child be using that tool and be engaging in a conversation. So exploring the idea, okay, what if my student starts to talk about self-harm, right? Engaging with this particular chat bot. And it was interesting the level of prompt that the child had to give before the AI actually flagged to a teacher that there's something concerning here about this particular student and the conversations that they're having with AI. But also because of the training data, this is a tool from North America, trained on North American data predominantly. It did make it gave some advice to the student, great advice, and including a telephone number to access to get help. But the telephone number was for the United States, right? Not from the UK. So as these tools are being created, and because of the unique nature of generative AI and the outputs that can be generated, and they're not rock solid yet, I think the process of licensing the tools, there's hundreds of tools that have been created for education, but whether or not they're actually licensed for education, I think we're still a long way away from that as we consider, what are the implications of using these tools with our students.
Thank you. I think your advice there is really sound. We really, as teachers, want to make sure that our students are using any AI platforms that have been approved by our school boards.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's a degree of protection and consideration that boards have to go through before they authorize which ones we can use. And maybe a little bit of a connected question is if there's any suggestions on how we might engage students with tools when these tools might require users to be at least 13 years of age with parental consent, and then no parental consent for students 18 plus. Any suggestions? I know. Go ahead.
That is really the tough one around this, and that fallacy of urgency, right? We are right to go slowly on this because there are implications. We could cause harm. So the first thing I'm going to say is check your board policy and see what your guidance is from your school board and their thoughts around that, and follow that. For myself, when I was in the classroom, because our board had given us access as students, were not allowed to use the tool. It was only ever through me doing the demo. In some cases, it's screen recording. Right, this is what the output is in order for us to analyze what the output is, right? Or copying, pasting outputs, and suggestions and ideas for the students, and which is a really tricky space, right? Because at the same time, we all know once they're out of the school, they're all using it. Right, they're all using it anyway, but I know it's really difficult to get the tools licensed and approved because tools that have been approved in our school boards, as soon as the tool, the creator of that tool adds AI to that tool, it's now a different tool. And in some cases, you cannot use that tool anymore because there's AI in it now. And the board needs to figure out what the approval process is because this AI has been integrated into it. So it's really messy and complex. And for the policymakers and the people whose job it is to keep kids safe in school, this is not an easy task that they've been asked to do.
Thanks, Heidi. I'm going to echo some of the sentiments that you shared when you were talking about AI literacy in particular. Your work with, or I think's work with students has really brought forward the need for strong AI literacy and understanding, in particular, biases. And then that AI literacy is not just something for teachers to have, right? We want to build this within our students. That's where it was coming from in your work. So helping, I guess not even helping, reminding our students that of the risks of engaging with AI that they did not pay for, that has not been vetted by the adults who are charged with their care. Using that puts them at risk, right? And as appealing as it may be to interact with these platforms, on your own time outside of school, we really need to remind our students to approach those with caution, right? Because we don't know what it is that they're interacting with. We don't know how those tools were developed. And quite frankly, those tools don't have your best interest in mind as students.
No.
So
No.
like that's part of the AI literacy. And I think that's a part of the messaging that we want to attach to AI literacy, right? That yes, teachers, students need to develop it. We need to develop it. And whatever safeguards we have right now to keep everyone safe, we need to use. And that's why school boards have the responsibility of deciding which which AI platforms teachers and students can use, right? That they are the ones who are responsible for making that decision.
Yeah, absolutely. And depending on what tool you're using and permissions you've said yes to, at certain points, humans still have to see things that we're putting in AI in order to improve their models. So there may be a possibility that something you've put into a large language model, particularly one that's free, that humans it's disaggregated from you, but humans might see what it is you've put in. And that's why you want to make sure, personal information, names, addresses, things even grade six is, yeah, it's kind of iffy putting that kind of information in. So anonymizing yourself, but also understanding even in the paid versions, like risks within that. I mean, now, if you have a paid version of ChatGPT, for example, you can create your own GPT, which is absolutely fantastic, right? Upload your own content into it. The math one from Oami is really amazing. That's in there. But I just watched a demo from people in cybersecurity and hacking who showed how you can go into that GPT that I've now created and I've paid to create that, and you can manipulate the AI to give away your training data or to give away, privacy pieces. It was so easy to figure out things that you thought were private within the GPT that it'll actually, by engaging, specific conversations with the GPT, you could give it to get it to reveal things about itself that perhaps you don't want people to know. So even in those paid for GPTs that you are creating, you really, really, really need to think about privacy and protecting the privacy of our students and ourselves, and what you're putting into that it's not something that might compromise someone's safety.
Thank you, Heidi. I want to go back to the I think challenge. The youngest grades that the challenge is for is which grade?
Grade six.
Grade six. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Makes sense.
And we're
Okay.
hoping to get some grant money and some funding so like to reduce the cost in our challenges a little bit. So we'll see, maybe something going forward around that would be lovely, so we can have more students participating.
Great. So there's a couple of questions that are more like in follow-up to the session that we've just gone through as total. There was in total rather. There was a question there about a recording. Yes, the recording is going to be made available. I believe it's going to be emailed to all of you, and then it will also be posted on the OTF YouTube channel. Someone did ask, they're working on they're participating in a working group in their board around AI. Their first meeting is later this month, and just wondering if it's okay if they can use some of the information you presented, or if, is it better for them to refer to other alternative sources? In particular, they found the slide of the young woman who was facing colorism, and it was the remake of the headshots. It captures, I think, a major concern around bias and training and stuff like that. So with the examples you provided in your presentation, are these things that we can also refer to
Yeah,
in other work that we're
absolutely. And
doing?
you can actually go on to, if you look at that website, Digital Colorism in AI, she actually has a website where you can go and access that directly. That's something you might even want to take into a classroom and have your students dive into that. Would be
Great.
a great thing to go and do. Yeah, absolutely. And please, reach out to me as well if you have questions or things that you want to discuss. Happy
Yeah.
to do that.
Heidi, would you mind just popping your email into the chat here
Sure.
so that everyone has that? In addition, you did mention that you are on LinkedIn, so people can connect with you there. But um, yeah. And so, someone noted that you actually have posted quite a bit of information on LinkedIn, so that might be another source for people to go to for additional information. That said, I think I have cleared all of our questions that people have posted here. So, maybe one more. Oh, yeah, yeah. So, Heidi, I'm going to take time now to thank you so much for coming and presenting, being a presenter as part of our OTF Connect series this school year. I certainly am grateful that you and I have reconnected through this work. I think that it is tremendous what kind of observations are that you have gleaned from the I Think Challenge, AI Challenge program. I think that it's very exciting, and I'm so grateful that we were able to make this connection and that you were willing to come and share your learning and provide some advice. It is feeling very much like I don't know, yeah, like a Wild West out there, and we want to do right by our students. We want to make sure that we don't introduce things that are going to cause harm, but really truly enhance their learning. And I think you've given us some great food for thought. So Heidi, on behalf of all of us, thank you for your time. All
Oh, it has
right.
been my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me here. And to all you Ontario educators out there navigating this in a classroom, I am so grateful in your classroom, so grateful for you to being willing to engage in this work. I support you 100%. Ontario teachers are so amazing. And so take that message away and try things with your students. And if something amazing happens, let me know.
Thanks so much, Heidi.